Tech Hub for a smarter you.
The NITDA issue is a controversial one, just like the government did ban and unban Twitter sometime between 2020 and last year. NITDA came up with new codes, meaning rules and regulations, policies on how you and I can get to use social media, specifically the big four: Facebook, Instagram, owned by Meta, Twitter, and also TikTok. These are the big four social medias we use here. It's a very interesting, interesting unbundling of the whole policies that I did with Ololade Otayemi, who is the founder, president of the Opera company. It's a pretty interview that you need to take a look at, because I asked them a question: is this going to be a 1 step forward, 10 step backward issue for Nigeria? You want to know what his answer is? Here's what the conversation sounded like.
Tech Hub for a smarter you.
All right, thank you so much for joining us on this beautiful edition of Tech Hub. There's so much worry since the federal government, through the National Information Technology Development Agency, also known as NITDA, did release a set of guidelines, a code of practice for online platforms operating in Nigeria, like the big four: the Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok. And I don't know what your thoughts are about the release so far.
The government has a responsibility to regulate what happens within their domain, within their jurisdiction, as we call it. However, when it comes to technology, regulation should not be more towards curbing the technology. Rather, it should be more towards finding out how this technology can be used for the greater good of the community and the society. The honest truth is that some of the regulatory measures that have been put in place are not necessarily doing that. Instead, they are sort of hindering the expansion and the use of this technology. And one thing is, as a country, as a community, we must understand that the only way we can grow as quickly as possible in this century that we are in, I mean, this is 2022, the only way we can grow as fast and as quickly as possible is to leverage technology. The more we leverage technology, the faster our economy, the faster our people will see growth and economic prosperity. So that's my take on it. I think that whatever regulations we're putting in place, and this will be my advice to any regulatory body who is thinking of anything or is planning anything, especially around tech, is that your regulation should be more of an enabler, to be able to help us utilize this technology for the greater good of the society, and not to sort of curb or hinder the use or the growth of the tech, as the case may be. So that's my take on some of these regulatory measures that have been put in place.
So there are worries that while the world is moving on, with transformation of technology, moving from what it is right now to IoT, Web 3.0, and everything immersive, Nigeria seems to be, taking probably 1 step forward and 3 steps backwards. And there are fears that it will stifle the growth of technology, which is contributing, immensely to the nation's GDP.
Yeah, that's very correct. If we go back to the way America became America today, we would see that the guys who built America, if you've seen this series, The Men Who Built America, you would see the stories of these guys that you read about: the Carnegies, the Rockefellers, the JP Morgans. These guys were people who were leveraging the technology that was available to them at that time to build their businesses, and in essence, they ended up building the economy of that country. Now, the only way we can also, and this doesn't mean that everybody has to go into tech actively. However, everybody has to figure out how to use technology to enhance and improve what they're doing, so that whatever you're doing can easily scale locally and globally. That is how we can build this country. We have to actively leverage technology. Now, like this Zoom call we are on, for example, typically some years ago, if you needed to interview me, I would have to be in your studio in Lagos for you to be able to interview me. Now you can interview me. You're in Lagos, I'm in Abuja. I remember once I was out of the country, you interviewed me from out of the country, So that is what we need to start looking at. how can we leverage technology across various sectors: agriculture, transport, education, health? How can we leverage technology across these sectors to begin to build scalable solutions that will help us to scale our economy? This is the way out for us in this. If we don't do this in 2022 going forward, we are just going to be wasting our time.
Ololade, I mean, Nigeria celebrated Democracy Day, June 12th, just a few days ago. And inclusion is one of the big deals when it comes to democracy, and the cry out of people, especially the youth, who actually are the major users of technology. I wonder how this, encourages inclusion, since majority of the youth actually get their own advantage of democracy from social media, because they can be able to air their thoughts and the views concerning, some issues. I wonder what your thoughts are on how much of inclusion or the otherwise it would have on the democracy of Nigeria.
Yeah. So one thing that we've realized is that a lot of Nigerian youth are active on social media. We voice our opinion, we speak, but how often are we able to translate those into actual change in the society? The closest we've ever gotten to it was when we had the EndSARS protest that was spurred by some youth on social media, right? Now, that is the model, and I know that a lot of people don't like that. A lot of, especially people in government, do not like the fact that we're able to carry active conversations on social media and do things physically in the society. But that is what social media needs to be used for. I'm not saying we should use it for violence in any way, but what I'm saying is the same principle behind that event is the same principle we need to try as much as possible to engage in and to use as we use social media. It's beyond just talking. A lot of people are talking about PVC, get your voters card and all. Many of them are just talking on social media. Not many of them are going ahead to go and get their voters registration done. Those are some of the things we're saying. Don't let it end on social media. Don't let it end on Twitter, on Facebook. Go outside. Whatever you're saying on social media, go outside and do the equivalent of those things. That is how we can use the power of social media to build the economy and pull ourselves together to do things together.
The government is going to tell you that. I think the excuse is going to give it's that it's trying as much as possible to curb the issue of the spread of misinformation, fake news, and the likes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So here's the thing with fake news. I was watching a documentary yesterday about a guy who rode from London to Lagos, right? And before he set out, he did some research from the CIA and some other bodies on some African countries. And while he was doing those research, there were a lot of countries, like I think Burkina Faso, or one of those countries, were deep red. That is, don't even go there. However, when this guy got there, his bike got stuck. His rear tire sports. A community where his bike got stuck were the ones that took him in for 3 hours, gave him water, refreshed him, helped him to retrieve his bike from the woods and all of that. And then they were the ones that helped him to find his way out of that place. Now, what I'm saying is, what really is misinformation? Let's be very honest with ourselves. Misinformation is from everybody's perspective. The government will say, hey, this is misinformation, when sometimes those things that are being said are not in favor of their regime or what they're doing. That's the honest truth. That's what I've seen in Nigeria. And look at this, for example, this information that this guy had that was sort of misinformation was from the CIA. So misinformation is from people's perspective. I think that what the government should focus on is to do their best, right, when it comes to serving the citizens, providing the necessary infrastructure and all of that. There is no misinformation when everything is, when there are evidence to things you can see. You can't misinform me right now that I'm a lady. I mean, I'm not a lady. So I think the government should really focus on that. I know that, yes, there are cases where people start spreading false news and all of that. But I really think that the job the government has, first of all, is to provide a safe environment for everyone, provide the necessary infrastructure that we need to grow and thrive as a community before we then start talking about people spreading what's, because sometimes what people spread are not really totally false in some
All
cases.
right. There's a
Just
lot of
that
work
the
to be
government doesn't
done.
like it.
There's absolutely a lot of work to be done on the side of the government and on the side of the people as well. And it is a wonder if the people were actually carried along, stakeholders in the tech ecosystem were carried along, in the social media ecosystem were carried along before they came across with this decision. So do you see the big four in Nigeria agreeing to this code of conduct by NITDA?
Yeah, well, if what I think should be done is that all the players should come to a round table and have a dialogue. The reason is because the big four have become ingrained into our society as a people. So there are people who literally cannot survive without social media. There are people who cannot survive a few minutes without their phones. You know, there are people whose livelihood is hinged on Instagram. Right. So we all need to come to a round table, the government and need to come to a round table and have a dialogue and say, hey, this is what works for us, and this is why. And the government needs to say, this is why we are trying to do what sometimes it might not just be you putting out regulations and all of that. Sometimes you just need to understand what is going on the other end, what's going on with the people you are regulating. Then sometimes the people who are being regulated also need to understand why the government wants them regulated. Sometimes that miscommunication is usually the problem. And then because the government has the power to put out regulations, it then becomes, it don't look as though they don't care about, they care, but they also have a responsibility to protect their citizens and protect their economy and their country. So everyone, I think the best thing to be done is not for the government to just put out this regulation and say, hey, you guys have to do this. And these guys say, hey, we're not doing it. I think a dialogue is necessary at this point for everybody to come to a middle ground.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us on this conversation, Ololade Otayemi.
All right. Thank you very much, Mercy, for having me.
Tech Hub for a smarter you.
Let me bring you another interesting interview I had way back with Joshua Olaya. He's a student and a self-taught robotic engineer who wants to change Africa.
Tech Hub for a smarter you.